Thank you for standing by and welcome to the LBT Innovations Quarterly Investor Call. All participants are in a listen-only mode. There will be a presentation followed by a question and answer session. If you wish to ask a question, you will need to press star followed by the number 1 on your touch-tone phone. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Brent Barnes, CEO and Managing Director. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chantel, and welcome everyone. This is Brent Barnes, and I'm pleased to welcome you to LBT's quarterly investor call. Our previous quarterly call occurred in February, and it's good to be speaking with everyone again. The format for the call will be similar to previous calls, where we'll provide an overview on operations and financial matters before we open it up to question and answers. As with previous calls, a recording of this call will be made available on our website at the conclusion of the call today. I'd now like to introduce our Chief Financial Officer, Ray Ridge.
Thank you, Brent. I would just like to deal with some formalities before we get into it. I would like to remind everyone on the call that today's update may contain forward-looking statements which involve inherent risks and uncertainties. Those risks and uncertainties include those disclosed in our ASX lodgement, which we do recommend that you review. There are grounds for any forward-looking statements made today. However, due to their inherent uncertainties, we recommend that you do not place undue reliance on those statements, and actual results may, of course, differ materially from those forward-looking statements. We're ready to go now. Back to you, Brent.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Firstly, I'd like to draw attention to the important company business update that was lodged with the ASX yesterday and encourage shareholders to download this from our website if not done so already. The business update outlined a number of lessons learned during our commercial launch in 2018 to find how the company viewed the issues that occurred and what has changed, along with a rebaseline of expected milestones going forward. In today's call, I'd like to talk through the lessons learned and focus on what has changed, along with the revised business outlook and goals. First, to begin, we acknowledge a number of important milestones were not achieved as we expected and disclosed to the market during the 2018 calendar year. Back at the start of 2018, we had expected that by now we would have made a small number of sales in each of the target geographies, being Europe, the United States and Australia, leading to clear proof of market potential and setting the basis for negotiations with distributors. Fundamentally, we experienced delays in the product development of the instrument, along with finalising the core artificial intelligence software that we call analysis modules, or AMs. AMs automate culture plate screening and interpretation automatically and remains the globally unique technology invention that we are focused on commercialising today. It took LBT 6 years to invent and prove the very first analysis module, which commenced development in 2010. This first AM was cleared by the US FDA in October of 2016 using the APAS Compact manual loading instrument and required a 10,000 patient clinical trial. Clearly, both the time and the cost associated with this development needed to change. Our challenge following this was to transition to a scalable and repeatable manufacturing process for software. This transition has required a change in strategy, creation of new processes, and recruitment of people, which commenced approximately 15 months ago. With respect to AMs, different geographies use different media types. Therefore, AMs need to be developed specifically for use on media most commonly used in each target geography. Therefore, these delays of new AMs meant that we were constrained to having a commercially available product in Australia only during 2018. Through our sales efforts to date in Australia, it's become clear that our public hospital sector, being the largest number of laboratories in Australia, don't expect to lodge any tenders for new equipment in microbiology within calendar year 2019. In the near term, we remain focused on the private laboratory groups, which are smaller in number. These privately owned labs make decisions through a business case process and have provided us with positive feedback. In our view, the lack of sales in Australia is not because customers don't like the product. It's due to timing of the public hospital tender process and the longer than expected sales cycle for the private laboratories, coupled by the fact that the technology is new to the global market and requires evaluation in the customer's own lab setting. What we got wrong was our expectations of having a finished product available for sale in each of Australia, Germany, UK and the US in 2018. In the market where we did have clearance to sell, which was Australia, we sold one instrument and have built a pipeline of customers who are considering purchase and in some cases running real lab evaluations. We learnt that while customers have positive feedback about the technology, their decision-making process takes time despite all of the sales and technical support we gave them. Understanding how and why our milestones were not achieved in the expected time frame has been part of an important transformation process undertaken by the board and management over the past number of months. We have adjusted our strategies, made improvements and continue to make progress to set the company up for commercial success over the coming 12 months. Later in this call, I'll talk more about the business outlook and what this means for us. I'd now like to shift focus and talk specifically about the previous quarter's operations that have already been lodged in our 4C earlier this week. In the last 3 months, our focus has been building market awareness and demand for early commercialization activities in Australia, Europe and the US. Starting with Europe, I'm just back from Amsterdam, where a couple of weeks ago we attended the European Society of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Disease Conference. Several hundred participants visited our exhibition booth to learn more about the instrument. During the meeting, our reference site, Labor Dr. Wisplinghoff, presented data of their experience using APAS independence with the MRSA module, reporting sensitivity and specificity of 100% and 98.1% respectively over more than 17,000 routine specimens. A new initiative to previous years was hosting a key opinion leader event where prospective customers heard from each of our global reference sites from Australia, Germany and the United States as customer advocates for our technology. Our European sales executive is currently targeting 4 major contract laboratories in Europe, which together operate 71 sites in Germany alone and service 50% of the region in microbiology testing. Shifting to the United States, we previously reported the submission of our 510K application to the US FDA in December of last year. I can report that we've had a number of interactions with the FDA during the quarter and so far have been able to provide feedback within a 48-hour time period. Ahead of our expected FDA clearance in the second half of 2019, we've commenced sales lead generation activities with prospective customers to start building a qualified sales pipeline. Finally, another key milestone is the development of the MRSA analysis module, which has now progressed to the clinical study undertaken by St Vincent's Hospital. The completion of the MRSA clinical study will support the self-certification regulatory processes for Europe and Australia, and later will form part of a 510K submission to the US FDA. MRSA is the most common specimen type used in culture plates in Europe, accounting for up to 35% of their total culture plate volume. In the March quarter, we also appointed 2 highly qualified non-executive directors to the board. Simon Arkell is a US-based tech entrepreneur and has a wealth of experience in software and AI companies. Damien Lismore is based in Melbourne, and his extensive commercial experience in M&A and business financing with international and domestic listed companies. I'll now turn it over to Ray Ridge to take you through the financial information.
Thanks, Brent. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to briefly review the financial results that were reported in the Appendix 4C as lodged with the ASX on Monday, the 29th of April. These numbers are all in Australian dollars, and in accordance with ASX listing rules, they are not audited. So for the quarter ended 31st of March 2019, the company had a net cash outflow from operating and investing activities of 1.5 million, and this was lower than forecast. That in the previous January Appendix 4C, we had forecast an outflow of $2 million. This is reflective of the steps we have taken to minimise our spend to only those activities absolutely critical to achieving a regulatory cleared product in the US and in the EU, and early work towards sales in those geographies. Going forward, we expect our run rate of cash spend to remain around that level, averaging between 1.4 and 1.6 million per quarter. We believe this is prudent in light of the longer lead time to sales as outlined by Brent and also in our corporate update presentation. This clearly pushes out our timeline break-even cash flows. With this approach for cash flow management, together with our cash balance at the end of March of 4.2 million and the 4 million undrawn loan facility provided by the South Australian Government, we believe the company is funded well into 2020. In relation to the loan facility, I can report that the company has achieved the requirements for the first instalment of $1 million and is presently in discussions with the South Australian Government in relation to the timing of that drawdown. Back to you, Brent.
Great, thanks, Ray. As discussed in my opening, I'm now going to talk through the business outlook and address our lessons learned from 2018. The issues associated with the instrument being finalised and available for sale in multiple markets are now resolved, and global product availability will become a reality in 2019, specifically in the United States, Germany and the UK. The commercialisation pathway for the United States is the most exciting prospect in 2019, where we are targeting FDA clearance in the second half of 2019 for the APAS independence with the urine module. As I noted, we have had a collaborative dialogue with the FDA in recent months. We've invested in lead generation activities ahead of expected market clearance, acknowledging the long sales cycle we now better understand. I want to set expectations from the outset that FDA clearance does not mean immediate sales. However, clearly, the clearance is an important signal to customers and allows us to ramp up sales outreach, customer evaluation, and also site visits to our Minneapolis Centre of Excellence. Clever Culture Systems will also be active at a number of clinical meetings, including the American Society of Microbiology meeting being held in San Francisco in June of this year. For Europe, CE mark for the instrument and MRSA module together is expected in the third quarter of this year, based on the St. Vincent's clinical study, which is close to completion, and then a self-certification process. The MRSA study presented by Labor Dr. Wisplinghoff was also well received during ECMED. Our dedicated European sales executive that started in December of 2018 is focusing on the German market, where a total addressable APAS market opportunity is approximately 300 laboratories, clearly much larger than Australia. In Germany, we're initially focused on 4 private contract laboratory providers that cover 71 sites and around 50% of all microbiology testing in Germany. In both Germany and the United States, we expect to place instruments as part of an evaluation to procure process. With the instrument finalised, the ongoing technology focus remains on completing additional analysis modules as quickly as possible. To support this, 15 months ago, we began an insourcing strategy to accelerate the timeline and reduce costs with our own internal capability in artificial intelligence, software engineering and science, and have now added 10 people to this team. We believe that we can halve the development time for subsequent modules as a result. The South Australian Government has also supported this initiative with the $4 million facility which Ray spoke to earlier in the call. By way of example, the MRSA analysis module has been delivered to Labor Dr. Wisplinghoff in 2018 and results published in previous weeks with clearly positive outcomes. We've also commenced clinical trials on this AM to finalise the validation, and we expect to be completed and have it commercially available in Europe and Australia during the third quarter of 2019 calendar year, and then ready for FDA submission following this. In closing, while we experienced delays in our product development and delivery of sales over the last 12 months, we've made significant advancements in both our capability to deliver and our commercial activities. We are poised on the cusp of having a saleable commercial product in the larger markets of Europe and the US in the coming months. APAS remains first in class as the only FDA-cleared product using artificial intelligence for automated clinical microbiology reading, and our competitive first-mover advantage remains strong and relevant today. We heard from Ray, we have $4.2 million in the bank and an outlook of cash inflows with a SAFA loan and expected R&D tax rebate later this year. To be very clear, with our prudent capital management, we believe we have sufficient funding runway well into 2020. And finally, our global market opportunity remains extremely large, with nearly 2,000 labs in our immediate addressable market. That's Australia, United States, Germany, and the UK, and we thank shareholders for your patience. For those who have joined the call today, we hope this update has provided some context with respect to our progress, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to the operator for any questions.
Thank you so much. I will just remind everyone it is star followed by the number 1 on your phone to register a question today. At the moment, we don't have any questions for you, Brent. We might just give it a moment. Okay, I've got Keith White, who is a private investor, for your first question. Go ahead, please.
Good day, Brent. How are you going?
Good, thanks, Keith.
That's good. Look, just a couple of couple of questions there. In regards to those, our 3 main areas, Australia, Europe and USA, how many machines are actually out there in place going through the evaluation process in those areas?
Yeah, Keith, so clearly we've got the 3 reference sites, and that was important to kind of set the foundation. So one at St Vincent's in Australia, one in Labor-Wispelinghof in Cologne, Germany, and one at Hennepin Health in Minneapolis. So we don't expect and don't plan on establishing any more of these key opinion leader reference sites. So with respect to placements, we have 2 placements active in Australia, and we have one additional one in Germany, and planning a number in the United States over the coming months.
Oh, okay. Well, my next question then is regarding distributor placements, and I know from what I gather, we've got to sell a couple of machines before you'll put in a distributor. So, but when do you expect to actually announce distributors for USA, in Europe, and whatnot?
Yeah, it is a really pointed question, and look, our challenge with answering that question is one of firstly reflecting on what has been a number of years where we've given updates to the market that we expect a distributor to be appointed, and clearly that has not happened. What we're focused on right now, and we remain in discussions with various stakeholders who are interested in distributing our technology, is getting a product to market. What we definitely know is that distributors want to de-risk absolutely everything with respect to distributing the product and putting their name behind it. So our focus is really about having a product available for sale. And as I mentioned in the call, in Germany or for Europe, we expect to have the CE marking in the 3rd quarter, and for the US in the second half of this year. So if you like, that's a key stepping stone or an activity that we expect we need to do prior to having a distributor appointed. In addition to those things, they definitely want to have the technology used routinely in laboratories, and we're making progress with respect to those placements and evaluations to procure over coming months and for the rest of this year. So look, I've kind of ducked the specific question about timing because I'm reluctant to give a specific date or guidance, other than saying that there are a number of steps that we're going through that we know our distributors will expect before they sign their name to it.
Okay, yes, thanks, Brent. Well, just back to the Australian market, and the public sector was a bit of a surprise there, where there's no interest this year. But in the private sector, we're kind of led to believe there'll be a multi-sale, and you said how you've learned a few lessons there. Is that multi-sale sort of gone out the window, or have we overcome the lessons where they're still interested?
Yeah, I'm just commenting on the public side, and just to clarify, what we've found is that customers, it's not that they're not interested. In fact, they're quite interested, particularly in the public sector. The challenge that we expect with those hospitals is they go through a tendering process, and so while we've been very busy and active meeting with lab directors and various stakeholders in those public hospitals, they're constrained by the public process, and so as we've disclosed, we don't expect there to be any tenders in this 2019 calendar year. On the private side, and you're right, we did indicate a potential multi-site conversion, it's absolutely not lost. We continue to work with the private laboratories, and those evaluations have and are taking place. What we rely on is really their internal decision-making process, and what we have found, to be quite candid, is that following an evaluation of the instrument, it's forced them to rethink automation more broadly, and that has been one of the motivating factors about why we've experienced some delays with respect to decision-making that we had expected at the end of last year.
Oh, well, thanks for that. Thanks for those answers there, Brett. It's put a bit of light onto that for me. So thanks again, and yeah, you better get back to work.
Thanks, Keith.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. We don't have any further questions. Once again, it is star followed by the number 1 to register for a question. But we've got nothing further for you, Brent. I'll hand back to you for closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, Chantel, and thanks for the question again, Keith, and for everyone joining the call today. Look, we've had quite a good start to the 2019 calendar year, particularly with the planned US market initiatives that have been active and the European ECMED conference. And really looking in the second half of this year is where some of the traction on the commercialisation activities really starts to materialise based on the efforts that we've done in this first half. I look forward to speaking with you again shortly during our next quarterly call. Thank you for your patience and for joining the call today. With that, I'm going to close the call.